Hi everyone, my name is Alina, and today we're going to be talking about slum tourism. So let's look at what is slum tourism. It's often referred as reality tourism or poverty tourism, and it's the idea of traveling to underdeveloped regions to observe conditions faced by those living in such settlements. So there are a lot of different viewpoints on it. Some say that it's an essential source of revenue for these poverty-stricken communities and it gives local guides jobs. Other people believe that it can have an educational purpose and raise awareness about poverty. But there are some opinions that argue that slum tourism is a tantamount to voyeurism and that it's an exploitative endeavor that capitalizes on the poor image. So, how did slum tourism start? Exploring impoverished and um, poverty stricken communities is not a new phenomenon. There's pictures, drawings, or photographs that often depict the detrimental situations people live in. But nowadays, looking at pictures is not enough, and people want to travel across the globe to see these places with their own eyes and have first-hand experience of what is happening in such areas. And it soon became a habit, and because of this, tour operators started to provide slum tours, which shows visitors the poorest areas of neighborhoods. So, as the globe has become more interconnected, slum tourism has grown as a business, but also the idea of it being controversial has also grown. So, the idea of slum tourism in general sparked an ethical debate. It aims to raise funds and awareness for community development, but also faces criticism for devaluing poverty and objectifying locals and being exploitive. So, there needs to be an approach that puts the needs and dignity of these communities first. So there are a lot of different areas with slum tourism. The six most highest rates of slum tourism are in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, Buenos Aires, Nairobi, Johannesburg, Mumbai, and Jakarta. The most popular ones are the ones in Dharavi, Squatter, which is in Mumbai, India, and it's known as the biggest slum in all of Asia. And the biggest slum and most dangerous one in all of Africa is known as the Kibera slum in Nairobi, Kenya. So, what are the controversies that surround slum tourism? The most controversial point is that it's perceived as entertainment or voyeuristic. So, the idea of tourism is associated with fun and entertainment, and many people would argue that it is voyeuristic to watch people living in poor conditions. The experience may be superficial and cannot lead to a genuine connection with the residents of the slums. Instead, it risks reducing complex and serious situations about the community into an attraction that these tourists can observe temporarily and move on. Kennedy Oded, she had an experience where she lived in slum and she saw slum tourists for the first time, and she said she felt like a tiger in a cage because a lot of people were taking photos of her. She believes that slum tourism is a one-way street where they get to take photos and she loses a piece of her dignity. Visitors often take photos, but they don't participate in meaningful interactions with these locals. And so these slum dwellers may feel exploited and reduced as curiosities because of the lack of engagement. This idea was asked and showed some skepticism by a fellow travel editor. He visited the Rio de Janeiro, Brazil favela, and he asked the question of why would you want to see a slum? And this sentiment reflects that tourists that visit these poverty areas, they're only visiting for curiosity rather than genuine understanding or to support these residents that live in such slums. Another controversial idea is that it devalues poverty. So when people visit slums often, the idea of poverty gets distorted. So visiting impoverished areas in South Africa suggests that they regularly misinterpret these towns as a place of great hope, maybe in TV shows or books or something, and this creates a skewed understanding of poverty. And people say that slum tourism provide a narrow and distorted view of poverty because it often emphasizes the most dramatic elements and at the same time downplays the intricate economic factors that maybe have shaped these circumstances these people live in, which leads to oversimplification. Another way that it's controversial is that people use slum touring as a way of escaping reality. Some individuals are drawn to unconventional experiences so they can escape the boringness of their daily lives. And it's known that a bunch of tourists that take such tours are belong to a wealthy upper middle class or rich people, or they consist of Western students. And since these wealthy people partake in such tours, often viewed to them as a means of escaping their boring life, and they see slum tourism as an adventure or something exciting. And it's because they view it as more of an authentic experience with poverty. And so this drive for authenticity begs the question of why should these tours exist in the first place? Whether they help comprehend the problems of experience, or whether they ruin the dignity of these poor people and objectify them as objects. Another reason why slum tourism is very controversial is that it's exploitive. So the idea that slum tourism could commodify and exploit poverty for the gain of travelers and tourism is one of the reasons why it's highly controversial. Even while some tourists say they donate some of their earnings to neighborhood or community initiatives, the effect might not be as significant. Lahari, he's a director of Indian tourism. He criticizes many of these slum operators for prioritizing profit over educating tourists. And they're criticized for exploiting poverty for the benefit of travelers and tour operators. Unfortunately, they're meant to take money for those running them and the tourists that go on them. And usually these tourists, without putting anything back in the community, this does not foster any cross cultural understanding, or it doesn't advance social issues. So, because of this, residents of slums may have mixed feelings about the presence of tourists, and it shows that slum touring might not always be giving the financial benefit to these communities as it should be. Rather, people just see it as an attraction for them to enjoy. So, but then why might people think slum tourism is a good idea? Those people argue that it's not voyeuristic, rather, it's altruistic, such as the International Housing Coalition argues that exposing people to slum circumstances and going on these tours can foster empathy and create political will that could be needed to find solutions to poverty in general. They argue that these they can also provide revenue for poverty-stricken communities. It said that these slum tours could bring extra income to these slum dwellers who survive on less than a couple of dollars a day. When many of these people go to these underdeveloped countries, they say that these tours could provide funds to create jobs for many people that live in such slums. The key is having tourists view slum through a different lens, so this can also provide an educational experience. Bahar Burhampur, she and her friend went to visit a Kabira slum, and she convinced themselves to not just do the tour to see poverty, but also see these residential slums and how their money could help them with some of the causes to make these slums a better living place for the residents. As long as slum tours positively interact with communities, people think they should be considered constructive rather than exploitive. Well, that's not always the case. First of all, not all tourists visit for altruistic purposes. They visit because they just want a self satisfaction and seen as a vacation. Not all tourists can make a deep connection with the poor, and nor do all care about them enough to withdraw money from their pockets to provide a better life for them. Rather, they snap endless pictures of these slums and post them on social medias. And this dehumanizes the locals, and usually these pictures are intended to generate revenue for the people in charge of them and the visitors that visit. Even though some people say tours can generate revenue for these communities and help them be better, most of these operating tours are used as profit for the operators instead. These tour operators sell these vulnerable conditions of these slum residents for their commercial gain, and so they can make a lot of money off of that. And by traveling across the globe, they provide money to the tour operators who price around, for example, 2 weeks' worth in Kenyan slum. And this goes to show that how much a tour is worth to these people living in the slums and how much a tour is worth to these people that come and visit the slums. And it makes those people who are living in the slums feel like display like animals in a zoo. Even though increasing slum tourism could raise awareness, not all people come for the idea of raising awareness. For example, the movie Slumdog Millionaire in 2008 boosts Mumbai's slum tourism industry. The movie showed the streets of Mumbai, and it opened the eyes of many tourists on how the streets in impoverished communities in Mumbai get by. But this rather increased the tourism of slums in Mumbai, but it didn't really financially help the streets of Mumbai to get better. It increased a lot of negative light on India, and and showed India being an underdeveloped country. Despite its potential for awareness, it often fell short of creating a substantial positive change. So, what is the solution? The idea of slum tourism is often a complicated topic, and its concerns about the commodification of poverty and exploitation is often also overruled by the potential to raise awareness. As the discussion goes around about this, the secret is to take a balanced stance that puts the needs and dignity of the affected people ahead of the tourist entertainment value. Rather, tourists should consider the intentions and consequences of their actions and try to contribute to the communities they visit instead of just for voyeuristic purposes. Then only slum tourism can fully realize its potential as a catalyst for good. Ultimately, slum tourism should be sustainable and ethical, so this can put people's empowerment and well being first and also increase more compassionate travel. Thank you.